Life in ancient Egypt was a busy and exciting time. From the dawn of civilization to the end of the Old and Middle Kingdoms, the Egyptians experienced a wealth of change and progress. In this post, we will be discussing the main events and happenings in ancient Egyptian history. We will also be providing a brief overview of the culture and lifestyles of the ancient Egyptians. Finally, we will conclude the post with a list of resources that you may find helpful in learning more about ancient Egyptian history. So, let's begin. Ancient Egypt's religions. Ancient Egyptians believed in many religions, which included gods and goddesses, spirits, and magic. Everyday life was governed by the laws of the gods, and pharaohs were considered their earthly representatives. There were a variety of religious ceremonies and festivals that were held throughout the year. The most important ceremonies were the New Year's festivals, which were celebrated with great pomp and circumstance. The Egyptians also believed in a life after death, and they made elaborate preparations for the journey to the afterlife. They built elaborate tombs for their dead, and they painted their walls and ceilings with scenes from the afterlife. Ancient Egyptian art is one of the most fascinating aspects of the culture. The art is exquisitely beautiful and often depicts scenes from ancient Egyptian mythology. The art of ancient Egypt is often thought of as being very brightly colored. This is because the ancient Egyptians used a lot of natural dyes, which would have resulted in a more vibrant art. Ancient Egyptian architecture is one of the most fascinating aspects of the culture. From the pyramids to the temples, the Egyptians were experts in creating structures that would last for centuries. One of the most iconic structures in ancient Egyptian architecture is the pyramid. The pyramid was designed as a tomb for the pharaohs and their consorts. The pharaohs were buried in pyramids of many different shapes and sizes, from small pyramids for the queens and children to the massive pyramids of the pharaohs. Pyramids were built in many different locations around the country, from Thebes in the north to Thebes in the south. The largest and most famous pyramids are the pyramids of Giza, built by Pharaoh Khufu. Pyramids are a great example of ancient Egyptian architecture. They are well designed and very impressive. They are a testament to the skill and craftsmanship of the ancient Egyptians. Ancient Egyptians were a very advanced society, and their technology and architecture was some of the best in the world. They had a very complex religion, which included a belief in a pantheon of gods and goddesses. They also had a very advanced system of writing, which was used for religious texts, legal documents, and tales. The ancient Egyptians were a very agrarian society, and their economy was based on the production and trade of goods. They had a very large fleet, which was used for trade and for the transport of people and goods. They also had a very strong military, which was used for defense and for the conquest of new territory. The ancient Egyptians were a very cosmopolitan society, and their culture included elements of the Near East, the Mediterranean, and North Africa. They also had a very strong trade network, which helped them to exchange goods and ideas with other cultures. The pharaohs were a ruling class of ancient Egypt. They had absolute power and were able to demand whatever they wanted from their subjects. They were also able to build great monuments and pyramids, which are still standing today. The pharaohs were able to do all of this because they had a strong grip on the economy. They were able to control the amount of resources that were available to them, and they were able to keep the population under control. The pharaohs also had a great deal of control over the people. They were able to control who could speak, who could write, and who could do what. The pharaohs had a great deal of power, and they used it to their advantage. The tombs of Memphis are some of the most famous in all of ancient Egypt, and for good reason. The city of Memphis was once the capital of ancient Egypt. The tombs of Memphis are a window into the life of the people of ancient Egypt. The tombs of Memphis are some of the oldest tombs in the world. The first tombs of Memphis were built around 3100 BC. The tombs of Memphis were built to house the bodies of the pharaohs and their consorts. The tombs of Memphis were also used to store the treasures of the pharaohs. The tombs of Memphis are some of the most well-preserved tombs in the world. The tombs of Memphis are also some of the most visited tombs in the world. The tombs of Memphis are a wonderful way to learn about the life of the people of ancient Egypt. Ancient Egyptian life. Ancient Egyptians were some of the most advanced and influential people of their time. They had a rich, complex culture that was full of art, music, and literature. They also had a very advanced way of life, with a well-developed social system and economy. Their society was structured around the idea of the pharaohs, who were the ruling class. Pharaohs were able to rule their country with an iron fist thanks to their powerful army and their ability to control the population. The pharaohs were able to do this because they had a strong economy that was based on agriculture and trade. Egypt was also a very religious society, with people worshipping many different gods and goddesses. They believed in the idea of reincarnation, which is why many of their burial practices were so elaborate. Today, the ancient Egyptian culture is still very influential. Their art, music, and literature still hold a fascination for many people, and their way of life is often studied in history classrooms. Ancient Egyptians believed in an afterlife and, as such, had elaborate funerals and burial rites in order to ensure that their loved ones would be able to join them in the afterlife. The process of mummification, which was first developed by the Egyptians, was a way of preserving the body for eternity. The body was soaked in natron, a form of salt, which absorbed the moisture and prevented the body from rotting. Next, the body was wrapped in linen and then placed in a coffin of wood or stone. If the individual was wealthy, they might have had a sarcophagus made of precious stone. Life in ancient Egypt was a pretty hectic experience. From rising at dawn to all hours of the night, everything was geared towards making sure the pharaoh and his family were able to live the best possible life. Although there wasn't much leisure time, there were plenty of ways to enjoy life. Pharaohs and their families would go on hunting trips, play games, watch shows, and of course, partake in the many festivals that were held throughout the year. Festivals were a great way to show off their wealth and also to unite the people under one banner. They were also a great way to get people to spend their money and enjoy themselves. It's interesting to see how some of the customs and traditions that we take for granted today originated from ancient Egypt. We can only imagine how exciting and fun life must have been back then. The end of ancient Egypt was a time of great change. After centuries of prosperity, the pharaohs had to face a new challenge, the rise of the Ptolemies. The Ptolemies were a dynasty of Macedonian descent who took control of Egypt in 305 BC. Under their rule, ancient Egyptian culture flourished. The pharaohs lost much of their power and were largely reduced to figureheads. However, the splendor and art of ancient Egyptian culture continued to be popular throughout the Mediterranean world. The end of ancient Egypt also marked the beginning of the Middle Kingdom, which is the period from the end of the Old Kingdom to the beginning of the New Kingdom.